Hello and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 3rd October 2025, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which are featured in today's newspaper. The handout of this very discussion is available in the comment section below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try and understand that why, despite having impressive real GDP figures, the policymakers are still concerned with giving a boost to aggregate demand in the economy. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll try and understand that how the recent rules introduced by the Odisha government is going to undermine the autonomous functioning of the Panchayati Raj institutions. And we'll also be discussing the other set of challenges faced by the Panchayati Raj institutions in India. Moving on to the simplified section, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues in the most simple manner possible, and we'll also be doing the value addition which would be relevant from prelims perspective. So stay tuned. So now beginning with the first topic, which is dealing with the curious case of GDP data. This particular topic we can associate with GS paper 3, Indian economy, issues related to growth and development. So what is the context? A write-up has appeared in the explain page of Indian Express, wherein the writer has pointed out a very interesting question. The writer says that if you look at the official data provided by the government with respect to India's real GDP growth rate, it is quite impressive. Okay, so it was 7.8% in the first quarter of financial year 2025-26 if you compare it with the first quarter of financial year 2024-25. Now the writer is questioning that even when the real GDP growth rate is quite impressive, then also why the policymakers are so concerned with respect to giving a boost to consumption in India? Let's try and understand this. But before we understand this particular context, let's just cover the basics. Okay, so first of all, what is GDP? So GDP basically refers to the final value, okay, or the market value of goods and services which are produced within the domestic territory in a year, okay, specified time period, that is 1 year. Now, GDP can be calculated through different methods. Let's look into them one by one. First method is product method or the value added method. So what we are going to do in the product method, let's suppose there are two firms A and B and they have produced X and Y goods. So we would be taking into account the aggregate final value of goods and services. But does that mean that we would be, just totaling the final value of goods and services produced by the two firms? Herein you need to understand the concept of intermediate goods. These are the goods which are actually used as a raw material, okay, in the production process, and they get consumed or used up in the production process. Now let's understand this particular method with the help of example. Let's suppose there's a farmer who has produced wheat and the final value of the wheat is 100 rupees. Now the farmer has provided wheat worth rupees 50 to a bakery shop, and bakery shop, the bread that it has produced, okay, the final value of the bread is 200. Now if I just total the final value of the goods produced by the farmer as well as the bakery shop, what I would get? 100 plus 200, so it turns out to be 300. Is this the GDP value? The answer is no. Here I need to look into the intermediate goods. Now as the 100 rupees worth wheat that was produced by the farmer, 50 rupees worth wheat was supplied to the bakery shop. Okay, so that is the reason I need to deduce the value of this intermediate good from the final value of the good produced by the bakery shop. Okay, so I get it. When I deduce it, I get it 150. So the final GDP figure would be 100 plus 150. That turns out to be 250. Why I deduce the value of this intermediate good? Because this intermediate good is a final good of some other firm. Okay, so if I just blindly aggregate the final value of the goods produced by two firms, I would be committing an error, that is double counting. How double counting? Because this 50 rupees worth, okay, good, intermediate good, that is wheat, which is being used by the bakery shop, I am also calculating this 50 rupees here and again I am calculating it here. Okay, so to avoid this double counting, what I need to look into that what is the value addition done by this bakery shop. And how do I get to know the value addition? Simply by this formula, wherein I will be putting the value of the final, okay, final value of the good produced by a particular firm. Final value is 200 minus the value of the intermediate good, and I will be getting the value addition. Okay, so this is what is product method. Here the GDP is equal to sum total of the value addition done by the all firms in the economy. So this is one method. What is the another method? The next method is income method, wherein we would be aggregating the incomes earned by the factors of production, okay, for their factor services that they provide. What all are the factors of production? So we have land, we have the labor, we have capital, and we have entrepreneur. Okay, what are the factor payments? For land, it is rent. For labor, it is wages. For capital, it is profit. Sorry, for capital, it would be interest. And for entrepreneurship, it is profit. Okay. So now, how do I calculate the GDP by using this income method? I'll be looking into the compensation given to the employees by a particular firm. So here I'll be taking into account the salary, wages, any other benefit provided by a firm in form of provident fund benefits, in form of health insurance benefits. Then we have operating surplus, which is actually, accruing to the people who own the property, okay, or who are the owners of the capital. Okay, so if somebody is the owner of land, so he would be getting rent. If somebody has provided capital for production of a particular good, then he or she would be getting interest, and the entrepreneur get the profits. Then we have mixed income of self-employed. Okay, so let's suppose a street vendor is there. Now a street vendor who is, let's suppose, selling samosas, that person would not be maintaining a separate account, okay, that how much money he got in form of wages, how much money he got in form of profits. So in such cases, we go with mixed income of self-employed, okay, wherein a proper account is not maintained. So this is how we calculate the GDP through the income method. Herein you have to keep in mind that we would not be taking into account the transfer, payments, okay. For example, the unemployment allowances paid by the government, or the old age pensions given by the government. Why we would not be taking into account such kind of transfer payments? Because no value addition is being done in the economy. No goods or services are being provided in return of that particular money. Then the last method is expenditure method. Now this method is very, suitable if you want to understand the demand side of the economy. So how do I calculate the GDP by using this expenditure method? So I would be, aggregating the consumption expenditure done by households like you and me, the investment expenditure, okay, done by the government as well as by the private firms, then the government expenditure, normal, whatever expenditure government, carries out to, run its daily affairs, and the net exports, that is exports minus imports. Why we are deducing imports? Because these are not produced within the domestic territory of a particular country. Okay, now how it helps us to understand the demand side of the economy? Let's suppose if C is going down, that is the private final consumption expenditure done by households like you and me, then in that case the government would be coming up with the requisite monetary policy or fiscal policy in that respect to give a boost to this consumption expenditure. Okay, and when this investment expenditure is going down, then the government would be, bringing schemes like the production link incentive scheme to give a boost to the investment expenditure. Okay, and if let's suppose net exports are going down, then the government would be coming up with the requisite policy for the export sector. Okay, so that is how this method helps us to understand the demand side of the economy. And here one of the prominent factor, if you go by the expenditure method, which is contributing enough to the GDP, is the private final consumption expenditure done by you and me, Okay, the households. It is the biggest engine of GDP growth in India, and it accounts for 55% to 60% of the GDP. Next is gross fixed capital formation. That is basically the investment expenditure done by the government also and done by the private firms, which is actually adding to the productive capacity of the economy. Productive capacity is, let's suppose the government has created, infrastructure, road. So that would be enabling the economy to produce further. Okay. So this accounts for 25% to 30% of the Indian GDP. And then we have expenditure done by the government. Here we would not be taking into account the investment done by the government for development of different kind of infrastructure. Okay, that would be taken into account in this gross fixed capital formation. Here we would be taking into account only that expenditure done by the government to run its daily affairs. So it constitutes 10% of the GDP. Okay, now why the writer is pointing out that the policy makers are so concerned about giving a boost to consumption expenditure? It is because of this thing. When you look at the private final consumption expenditure, it is the engine of growth when it comes to GDP, as it contributes to 55% to 60% to the GDP. And keeping in mind the new set of tariffs introduced by the Trump administrations, so in that light also, the government is trying to give a boost to the consumption expenditure. In India, GDP is basically, driven by consumption expenditure done by you and me. That is the reason the government, came out with the GST 2.0 reforms, okay, reducing the tax slabs on different goods. And that is the reason the government also, extended the tax exemption limit to 12 lakh. In this year budget. But before we move further, you need to understand that there are certain issues with the GDP also. GDP does not take into account the care work done by the housewives. Okay. Then it tells nothing about the level of inequality in the economy. And that is something that we have discussed in the previous Analyst also, that how in this era of artificial intelligence, the GDP is growing, okay, at a massive rate, but the, welfare benefits are not reaching to the massive workforce that is there. The profits which are being generated by use of this artificial intelligence are being, concentrated in the hands of few corporate houses. So GDP figures does not tell us anything about the level of inequality in the economy. Okay, so it cannot tell you anything with respect to the welfare of the people. And lastly, when it comes to GDP, it does not take into account the externalities. Basically, we talk about the negative externality. Let's suppose a firm is there and it is, deteriorating the environment by producing a lot of waste. So that cost, okay, of environmental degradation is not taken into account when it comes to GDP. That is the reason we talk about a concept of green GDP, which do take into account that, how much environmental degradation we have done to get the GDP figure. So these are the limitations of GDP. Now, the article is basically focusing upon nominal GDP, why it actually matters, okay, irrespective of the fact that we have the, impressive numbers when it comes to real GDP. Now, before you understand this, you need to understand the concept of nominal GDP and the real GDP. For this, let's take an example. Now, let's suppose 10 cars were produced and price of each car was roughly 100 rupees. Okay, so GDP comes out to be 1000. In 2025, I produced only 5 cars, but the price is 200. So it turns out to be 1000 again. So by looking at this thing, what we are seeing is that the nominal GDP is the same in both the years. So how do I get the nominal GDP? Nominal GDP is price in current year into quantity produced in current year. So these two figures that are written here, this is basically a nominal GDP. Okay, that year quantity, I have multiplied it with the price of that year. Now, how do I get real GDP? In real GDP, what do I need to do? I'll be taking this base year price. So it is 100 and I'll be multiplying it with the quantity produced in the current year. So it turns out to be 5 and it turns out to be 500. So what does this tells me? That the real GDP is less. Okay, so the figures that you're getting with respect to GDP is not because of improvement in the number of goods and services produced in the economy. Okay, if I tweak the numbers, let's suppose here we have 100, here I take 300. So what would be the nominal GDP that I'll be getting? This would be the nominal GDP, and if I calculate the real GDP, it would be 500. So this brings me to the important concept of GDP deflator, which also helps us to understand that the inflated GDP figures that you're getting, is it because of increased goods of, increased production of goods and services, or it is merely because of increase in prices. So here if you put in the values, so nominal GDP is 1500 divided by 500 into 100. Turns out to be 300. So what this 300 is telling me, that the nominal GDP is 3 times that of real GDP. Okay. So this is the concept of nominal GDP and your real GDP as well as GDP deflator. And if let's suppose this GDP deflator turns out to be 100, in that case we will be saying that the nominal GDP is equal to the real GDP. Okay, now let's just understand that why the article is saying that the nominal GDP also matters. Because it is a nominal GDP which is used as a benchmark for almost all the key economic variables, be it tax collection, okay, be it the government's gross fiscal deficit or total market capitalization of listed companies. So that is the reason nominal GDP matters. Then it helps us to understand what is the state of the economy. So now the next year budget would be formulated, and herein the nominal GDP would be considered to be as the starting point for all the calculations. Okay, what all rebates should be provided by the government to any particular sector. Then it captures the demand side of the economy very well. Okay, because usually in nominal GDP we witness that the prices have increased. And when do you witness inflation? When there is higher demand as compared to the supply. Okay, so if I am witnessing inflation in the current year, and because of which I am getting nominal GDP inflated figures, that means that there is higher demand in the economy as compared to the supply. That is why the writer is saying that nominal GDP helps us to capture the demand side of the economy very well. But when you talk about the real GDP, it actually maps the supply shortage effectively. Okay, the supply side story better. And that is the reason the nominal GDP also matters, irrespective of the fact that we have an impressive real GDP growth rate. Now, the last thing that we need to understand is that what was the change in the methodology which was done way back in 2015 with respect to estimation of GDP, because previously UPSC has asked a question on this respect. So if you go by the National Statistical Commission, it has recommended that the base year for computation of the GDP or the national income should be revised every 5 years. Okay, so based on this recommendation, we basically revise the methodology for calculation of the GDP. And the methodology was in alignment with the recommendation given by UN Systems of National Accounts. And you need to tell me in the comment section that which person is heading the panel which has been constituted by the government to revise the base year for the GDP. Okay, the government is planning to revise the base year from 2011-12 to 22-23. You need to let me know the name of the chairman of that particular panel. Now coming back to the discussion. So when it comes to the changes that were introduced way back in 2015, the first changes that were introduced was we changed the base year. So previously the base year was 2004 and 5. Now the base year is 2011 and 12. What is the relevance of base year? It is actually used to calculate the real GDP. Remember, in the real GDP what we were doing? Price of the base year multiplied by quantity of the current year. So this, when you change the base year, you are able to adjust your real GDP keeping an alignment with the rising inflation. And that is the reason the government is planning to, further change the base year to 22-23. Okay, because over a period of time, the inflation has increased manyfold. And if you calculate it on the basis of 2011 and 12, you would be getting very inflated figures of the nominal GDP in comparison to the real GDP. Okay. Then when it comes to capturing the growth of the manufacturing sector, previously we used to use index of industrial production and the annual survey of industries, which used to provide us data with respect to 2 lakh factories. But post 2015, we have started using MCA21 database, which provides us the data with respect to 5 lakh companies. Okay, so the coverage of manufacturing sector has improved. Then previously GDP at factor cost was considered to be the final GDP, but now GDP at market price is considered to be as the final GDP. Okay, so this is the reason why this methodology is also criticized, because if you are considering GDP at the market price as the final GDP, then that means you will be getting inflated figures of GDP because of the taxes. At factor cost, we only sum up what? The factor income earned by the different factors of production. Okay, and in this factor cost, if you add both the production taxes as well as the product taxes, then you get the market price. So even if, let's suppose, goods and services are not produced much, but there are high production taxes as well as product taxes, so in that case you will be getting a inflated GDP figure at market price. Okay, then when it comes to sector-wise estimate, we are going to calculate gross value addition at basic price. How this factor price is different from basic price and how this basic price is different from market price, let's just understand. Now, before we understand this, you need to understand what is this production tax. Production tax is the tax which is irrespective of the volume of production. Okay, no matter whether you are producing a good or not, even if you have produced zero product, then also you have to pay this production tax. For example, if I am buying a property, I need to, give stamp duty. So this is irrespective of the volume of production. But when it comes to product taxes, they are dependent upon the volume of production. So if you are going to increase the production, then the product taxes would increase. Example is the GST. Okay. Now, when it comes to the basic prices, if you add net production taxes in the factor cost, you get the basic prices. And in the basic prices, if you add the product taxes, you get the market prices. So why we are getting the industry wise estimate or sector wise estimate at the basic prices? So that we can understand that what is the difference between basic price and market price. Basically, we are trying to get an idea of the product taxes, that whether we are getting a higher GDP figure at the market price because of this higher product taxes or not. Then when it comes to agriculture, previously the value addition in agriculture was limited to value addition done in the farm produce, but now after the change in methodology, we are also looking into, account the livestock related data. And after the change in the methodology, we are doing a wide coverage of the financial sector. Previously, banking, insurance, mutual funds, etc. were covered, but now stock brokers, stock exchange, asset management companies, the regulatory bodies like SEBI, Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority of India, all these are basically covered. Okay, so we have a wide coverage of the financial sector as well. And when it comes to the criticism of this methodology, I've already told you that in this we get an inflated GDP figure because we are considering GDP at market price as the final GDP. Okay, and you will be getting a higher GDP even because the product taxes are quite high, even though there is not any increased production of goods and services. So that's all that we have to discuss with respect to this particular topic. We have a PYQ on this particular topic, so do practice this as well and do practice this practice question that I have prepared for you people. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, beginning with the second topic, which is dealing with the Panchayati Raj institution, this particular topic we can associate with GS paper 2, devolution of power and finances up to local levels. So what is the context? Odisha government has announced the new Odisha Panchayat Samiti Accounting Procedure Amendment Rules 2025. And the opposition political party has pointed out that these rules are going to undermine the autonomous functioning of the Panchayati Raj institutions in that respective state. Now, before we understand that what changes have been introduced with the help of these rules, let's just understand the relevance of Panchayati Raj institution first. So when I talk about Panchayati Raj institutions, they were introduced through 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act in 1992. And this gave effect to Article 40 of DPSPs. And it inserted Part 9th and Schedule 11th in the Indian Constitution. And it talked about giving 29 functions to the Panchayati Raj institution. These are some basic prelim facts which you should know. Now, talking about the relevance of Panchayati Raj institution, the first relevance is they enable us to realize the idea of grassroots level democracy, wherein the people have a direct say when it comes to the democratic decision making. And since the Panchayati Raj institutions are at the local level, the villagers, the people can hold the elected representatives accountable. And that is the reason we are seeing some good case studies when it comes to effective functioning of the Panchayati Raj institution, that how because of the strengthening of the grassroots level democracy, we are seeing Panchayati Raj institution bringing transformational change at the grassroots level. So we have the example of Panchayat of Hiwara of Uttarakhand, wherein the Panchayat has improved the access to clean water, improved the road infrastructure, and has promoted the solar energy. Then another example is that of Peda Ambarbed Gram Panchayat of Telangana, wherein they have set up the waste segregation unit and they are ensuring segregation of organic and inorganic waste, and they are ensuring effective use of this organic waste as manure. Okay, so it is possible only because of grassroots level democracy. Then it is enabling us to move in the direction of decentralization of power, wherein we are not going with top to down approach. Everything decided by the center, irrespective of the local needs and requirement. So because of this Panchayati Raj institution, we are able to make sure that the local needs and concerns are taken into consideration when the Gram Panchayat development plans are constructed or formulated. Then it is enabling us to uphold the idea of good governance also, because the important pillars of good governance like the consensus oriented decision making or the participatory democracy are being realized with the putting in place of the Panchayati Raj institution. Then it is enabling us to make the governance mechanism more inclusive. Why I am saying inclusive? Because when it comes to the Panchayati Raj institution, therein we have provided reservation to SC, STs, as well as 1/3 of the seats are reserved for women also. For SC and STs, the seats would be reserved in proportion to their population in that respective area. Okay, so when it comes to Odisha, it was the pioneer when it comes to giving reservation to the women in the Panchayati Raj institution, and in 2012 it has increased the reservation limit for women to 50%. Currently we have nearly 14 lakh elected women representatives working in the Panchayati Raj institution. So because of this Panchayati Raj institution, women now have a say when it comes to political decision making. Okay, and ultimately they are able to climb the political ladder, becoming the MLAs and MPs. Prominent example being your Draupadi Murmu. Then another great example of women empowerment is that of Chhavi Rajawat, who was basically an MBA graduate, but she turned into a Sarpanch and she has brought transformational change when it comes to her ancestral village. Okay, improving the rural infrastructure, renewable energy projects, etc. And it is because of this Panchayati Raj institutions only that we are now able to come up with this idea of localization of SDG goals. What do I mean when I say localization of sustainable development goals? It basically means, incorporating the sustainable development goals in the Gram Panchayat development plan. Okay, keeping in light the local needs and requirements. So in order to realize this idea of localization of sustainable development goals, we have local 2030 platform wherein we are providing requisite support to the gram panchayats in terms of tools that they can use for robust review and monitoring, in terms of sharing of the experiences and the best practices. So when I talk about localization of sustainable development goals, it is basically based on 4 pillars. First is institutional ownership of the sustainable development goals by the local bodies which are there. Then it talks about robust review and monitoring system with respect to the local parameters. Integrating sustainable development goals in the planning, that is gram panchayat development plan. And according to that, the gram panchayat should do the financial allocation also. And it goes with the whole of society approach, basically participative democracy. Now, having understood the relevance, let's just explore the challenges faced by the Panchayati Raj institutions in India. First and foremost prominent challenge is lack of devolution of 3 Fs, funds, function and functionary. If you go by Ministry of Panchayati report of 2022, less than 20% of the states have devolved all the 29 subjects in the 11th schedule of the constitution when it comes to Panchayati Raj institution. And in this respect, Karnataka has performed very well. It is the state which has, devolved maximum number of subjects to the Panchayati Raj institution. Then it is followed by Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc. Then there is limited financial autonomy. Now, what is the problem with Panchayati Raj institution is, when you go by the RBI report, when it comes to own tax revenue, it is merely 1%. And if you look at grants from central government, it is roughly 80%. So they are majorly dependent upon the grants from central government. Now, what is the problem here is, central government is giving more tied grants instead of untied grants. Now, what is the difference between tied and untied grants? Let's understand this with the help of some simple example. Let's suppose your parents have given you pocket money, okay, which you can spend in any way possible. Okay, so that is a kind of untied grants wherein you have the autonomy to spend. But if your parents have given the money to pay the fees of a particular course, that is a kind of tied grants. That is also leading to your development, intellectual development, but then you don't have the autonomy to use it. Okay. So that is a problem when it comes to Panchayati Raj institution. Here, what we are seeing is, there's a reduction in untied grants. Previously, they used to get 85% of the grants as untied grants when it comes to 13th Finance Commission. And during the 15th Finance Commission, the untied grants have reduced to merely 60%. Okay. So they don't have the autonomy to decide that where they want to spend, keeping in light the local needs and requirements. Then another problem is that of proxy representation. Although we have provided 1/3 of the seats to be reserved for the women, but the male members in the family don't consider the elected women representatives at the Panchayati level that they have the efficiency to take decisions. And that is the reason we see this problem of Sarpanch Pati. So this is not actually leading to true political empowerment of the woman, wherein although a woman got elected as a representative, but then all the financial, all the decision with respect to that office are taken by the male counterpart, basically the husband or any other male, member in that family. Then another problem is creation of parallel bodies. In the 11th schedule, as I talked about, there are 29 subjects which the states have to devolve to Panchayati Raj institution. But what we are seeing is, instead of giving these functions to the Panchayati Raj institution, the state government or the central government, they are creating parallel bodies which are encroaching upon the functional space when it comes to the Panchayati Raj institution. One of the prominent example is of such parallel body is National Rural Infrastructure Development Agency, which is created for implementation of Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. Okay, all the rural infrastructure is one of the function given to the Panchayati Raj institution in the 11th schedule. So it severely undermines the functioning of the Panchayati Raj institution. Then on account of technological development also, the role of Panchayati Raj institution when it comes to identifying the beneficiaries for a particular scheme, that has gone down to a great extent because of this Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile Trinity. Okay, take for example the PM Kisan scheme. Herein, the Gram Panchayat do not have any role when it comes to identification of beneficiaries. Then there is urban policy bias. Now we know that majority of the people are migrating towards the urban areas, and that is the reason the government is more concerned about bringing reforms in the municipal corporations. And this is what is referred to be as urban policy bias. The government is not much concerned about bringing the requisite reforms when it comes to functioning of Panchayati Raj institutions. Now let's just look into that, changes have been introduced by this new rules introduced by the Odisha government. So it has severely crippled the financial, autonomy and authority of the Panchayati Raj institution, because earlier the block development officers were allowed to approve bill only up to a limit of 2 lakh. Beyond this amount, they have to get the permission of the chairman of the Panchayat Samiti. But now this threshold have been increased to 10 lakh. Then the authority to approve Panchayat Samiti plans and estimates have been given to a senior bureaucrat, that is Chief Development Officer cum Executive Officer. Okay, so we are doing this by passing the elected chairperson of the Jila Parishad. And lastly, when it comes to implementation powers with respect to certain schemes like MG Narega, here the financial authority, has been transferred to engineers instead of the elected representatives. So these all changes have been introduced through this particular rules, which have been introduced by or announced by the Odisha government. Now, having understood the challenges faced by the Panchayati Raj institution, what needs to be done now? First and foremost, as the 13th Finance Commission has recommended, that the state should come up with a supplementary report wherein they need to give detail with respect to the funds that they have transferred to all tiers of Panchayati Raj institution, that is village level, block level, district level. And that supplementary report should also give detail with respect to the funds that has been transferred to the Panchayat outside the state government budget, basically the money that they are getting from the central government also as grants. This would enable us to, ensure transparency when it comes to financial devolution. Then we need to make the Panchayati Raj institution financially empowered. For this, what we need to do, the central government as well as state government, they should provide more untied grants so that the Panchayati Raj institution has the requisite financial autonomy when it comes to spending that money in accordance with the local needs and requirement. And then we need to, create a performance-based grants. This would incentivize the Gram Panchayats to perform better. Okay, so if they would be getting performance-based grants, so this would incentivize the other Gram Panchayats also to perform better and address the local needs and requirement. And lastly, in order to become financially empowered, the Panchayati Raj institution cannot always be dependent upon the central and the state government. They need to make use of their financial powers. So they need to, use the different kind of taxes, like for example, land tax, property tax, etc. And they need to enhance their own tax revenue. Then, as the second ARC has recommended, that we need to do clear activity mapping, guided by the principle of subsidiarity. What is principle of subsidiarity? That if a particular function can be performed at a level of government, at the lowest level of government, then that function should be performed by that level of government only. That function should not be given to a higher level of government. So when it comes to activity mapping, we need to actually, do the effective mapping that what all functions needs to be given to the 3 tiers of the Panchayati Raj institution. So that there is clarity. And this needs to be done in alignment with the principle of subsidiarity. That means if a function can be performed effectively by a lower level of government, then that function should be performed by that level of government only, not the higher level of government. Then we need to come up with the independent Panchayati Raj administrative services to basically address the issue with respect to functionaries, like what we have in case of Karnataka. Then we need to strengthen the Panchayati Raj institution instead of creating parallel bodies, which ultimately encroach upon the functional space of the Panchayati Raj institution. So in this, we can adopt the Kerala model, wherein it has put in place the Panchayat Ombudsman, which would be looking into all the grievances with respect to functioning of Panchayati Raj institution. This enables us to embolden the trust of the public when it comes to the functioning of Panchayati Raj institution. Then we need to do capacity building of the elected representatives. Okay, for this, effective implementation of Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan is needed. And special emphasis should be given to elected women representatives so that we don't, in future face the problem of proxy representation or sarpanchpati. Then we should make use of e-governance solutions also. For example, e-Gram Swaraj is giving a boost to digital documentation and online record keeping. And in order to further strengthen the financial autonomy of the Panchayati Raj institution, the drone-based survey that is being done under the Swamitva scheme, that should be effectively used to calculate the property tax as well as land tax that can be imposed by the Panchayati Raj institutions. Okay, all this would enable us to realize the idea of Atmanirbhar Panchayats. That's all that we have to discuss with regard to this particular topic. There's a PYQ on this particular topic, so do practice this and do also practice this particular practice question that I have created for you people. With this, let's move on to the simplified section. Now, beginning with the simplified section, a write-up has appeared in The Hindu, wherein an important question is being addressed by this article, that the Chinese dominance that we have seen when it comes to the PV modules with respect to solar energy, can the same dominance be ensured by China when it comes to electrolyser market? This particular topic you can associate with the environment section of your prelim syllabus. So in the recent times, what is happening when it comes to the clean energy market, the focus has shifted from solar and wind energy to green hydrogen. Why India is emphasizing or focusing upon green hydrogen? Because this would enable us to reduce our carbon footprint. Then hydrogen is most abundant element in the universe. It is lighter also, and it is 2 to 3 times more efficient when it comes to burning of petrol. And this would enable us to realize the idea of decarbonization of the transportation sector, which contributes 1/3 of the India's greenhouse gas emissions. Now, when it comes to the green hydrogen technology, we have electrolyzers at the core of this transformation, much like the photovoltaic modules that we have with respect to solar energy. And we already know China has a dominance when it comes to in the supply chain of PV modules. Now, before we dwell further into this particular article, let's just understand what are the different types of hydrogen that we have. Okay, first is green hydrogen, which is the emphasis of this particular article also. So herein the raw material is water and the process that we are using is electrolysis. And here the energy which is being used, it is the renewable energy. Now the same raw material, the same process would be used in pink hydrogen. The difference would be the energy used. So here we are using nuclear power. Then we have turquoise hydrogen, okay, which is produced by thermal splitting of methane. So we are using methane pyrolysis, and here instead of carbon dioxide, solid carbon is produced. Then we have black or grey hydrogen, which is extracted from natural gas using steam methane reforming. And the same process is being used in blue hydrogen also. The difference is here the carbon dioxide that is produced, that is sequestered or stored, and further it would be utilized. So here we are making use of carbon capture and utilization technologies. And lastly, we have brown hydrogen, wherein we would be using coal. The process is coal gasification. Then the last type of hydrogen is white hydrogen, which is also referred to be as gold hydrogen. It is naturally produced in the earth crust and is considered to be the potential clean energy. It generally exists combined with other molecules. White hydrogen have several advantages when you compare it with the other hydrogen. It causes no CO2 emission when it is used as fuel. It is compatible with existing infrastructure and technologies also for hydrogen production. It is cheaper and more efficient than the other processes that we have, and it is abundant and it is renewable in nature. And its deposits have been found across the world in US, Eastern Europe, Russia, Australia, France and other countries. And it is estimated that globally there could be tens of billions of tons of white hydrogen. But the problem is they exist combined with other molecules. So problem is basically the extraction. Now coming back to the article. Now the article is questioning that can China, maintain its dominance in this green hydrogen technologies also? So if you go by the 2024 data set, China has become the world's leading hydrogen producer. It is producing almost half of the world's green hydrogen output. And with respect to electrolyzers, production, it is dominating 85% of the global manufacturing capacity of alkaline electrolyzers. So we have two kind of electrolyzers. One is alkaline electrolyzers, other one is proton exchange membrane electrolyzers. China has a dominance in alkaline electrolyzers. Okay. Now when it comes to the alkaline electrolyzers, the cost is quite low. They are less efficient than the other electrolyzer, and they have the problem of fluctuating loads. Such problem is not there when it comes to the proton exchange membrane electrolyzers. They offer higher efficiency even when there is fluctuating loads, and they produce higher purity of hydrogen as an output. Now let's just understand that what is the difference between the two kind of electrolyzers that we have. When it comes to proton exchange membrane electrolyzer, herein water is used as a raw material, and here it would be decomposed in H plus and O2 by using the electrolysis process, and it would be done at the anode. Here you can see, okay, H plus ions and the O2. And here when it comes to anode and cathode, they are coated with platinum and iridium. When it comes to the polymer membrane, it allows the hydrogen ions to diffuse. As you can see here, this is the polymer membrane, okay, and it allows the CO2 to pass as an output. So that is why it is, providing more pure form of hydrogen. And we have a porous transparent layer of titanium and carbon paper. This is the porous transparent layer, which enhances the diffusion and the splitting of water, and it is gold plated, which strengthen its lifespan. When it comes to alkaline electrolyzers, herein the redox reaction takes place at cathode here, and here the water would be broken down into H2 and OH negative molecules. Here the electrolytes are coated with nickel alloys, and when it comes to alkaline electrolyzers, we have a porous diaphragm. This is the porous diaphragm, which enables the OH negative ion to migrate, okay. So porosity basically means that there is slightly greater risk of gases getting diffused in the cell, and that is the reason this alkaline electrolyzer is not able to give you, very pure form of hydrogen. The input remains the same, okay. So there is a difference between the, redox reaction. The raw material is same, that is water, but the breaking down of the water molecules is different in both kind of electrolyzers, and there is difference in the coating of the anode at the cathode when it comes to the two types of electrolytes. Now the question is, how did the China establish dominance? So China was able to capture the global market of solar PV modules by providing various state subsidies, integrated supply chains, okay, and it has control over raw materials also. And when it comes to electrolyzers also, the average price of alkaline electrolyzers is less, okay, which is provided by China if you compare it with the global prices. And when it comes to China, it is over a period of time, it is maturing its supply chain. I am talking with respect to alkaline electrolyzers, and it is witnessing increased entry of the marketplace, okay. So that is also bringing down the cost when it comes to alkaline electrolyzers. Now alkaline electrolyzers are basically made up of nickel and steel, which is abundantly available in China. We have discussed here that it is, coated with nickel and steel, specialized steel, which is abundantly available in China. But when it comes to the proton exchange membrane electrolyzers, it is coated with iridium, platinum and titanium. Here we have studied platinum, iridium, titanium, okay, which is not abundantly available when it comes to China, okay. And that is the reason China is basically establishing its dominance when it comes to production of alkaline electrolyzers and not when it comes to PM electrolyzers, okay. Now the last question which the article is looking into, that will China be able to emerge as a dominant player when it comes to green hydrogen technologies? So there are certain positive points in this respect. When it comes to China, it is, enhancing its production facilities, it is expanding its international presence also, and it has made great advancement in the technology. But its emergence as a dominant player is still questionable, okay, because unlike the solar energy, green hydrogen sector is highly prioritized by different countries, and they have rolled out their own national plans wherein they are trying to give a boost to the local competitiveness. Okay, they don't want that China should emerge as a dominant player, so they are giving adequate subsidies so that new market players could come and local competitiveness could be given a boost to. And when it comes to the green hydrogen technology, Chinese imports are likely to face significant scrutiny, restrictions and stringent regulation. Why? Because the governments are more concerned with respect to developing or giving a boost to local competitiveness when it comes to the production of green hydrogen, okay, and the technologies related to it. So that's all that we have to cover in this particular topic. Let's move on to the next topic. Now recently, RBI has introduced certain measures to enhance the liquidity when it comes to the capital markets in India. This particular topic we can associate with the economy section of a prelim syllabus. So first thing that we need to understand is why RBI has taken these measures to give a boost to the liquidity support when it comes to the capital market. Why it has come up with the measures which is going to make capital more accessible for the investors like you and me and for the companies as well. Because of the Trump administration imposing tariffs on India and the curbs with respect to H-1B visa. Okay, so now if you're applying for the first time, you have to pay a hefty fee to get the H-1B visa. So this has increased the uncertainty when it comes to the Indian economy, and that is the reason the foreign portfolio investors, they have pulled out their money. Approximately $21 billion they have pulled out from the Indian markets. Why? Because when it comes to foreign portfolio investors, they are merely concerned about the returns. And whenever they see that in future this country is going to face some sort of uncertainty, so they would be pulling out their money and they would be investing in any other asset which would be giving them higher returns. Okay. Now the thing that we need to understand is what is the difference between FDI and FPI. So according to Arvind Mayaram panel recommendation, which was accepted by the government, foreign portfolio investment basically refers to the investment done in a listed company whose stocks are traded on the stock exchange, but they hold less than 10% of the total paid up capital. When it comes to foreign direct investment, it basically refers to any amount of investment being done in unlisted companies, that would be categorized as FDI, and investment done by the foreign investors in a listed company greater than 10% of the total paid up capital. Okay, so this was the definition given by the Arvind Mayaram panel, whose recommendation was accepted by the government, and that's how we define FDI and FPI. So when it comes to foreign direct investment, it allows the foreign investor to have a direct control and direct ownership over the assets, but that is not the case when it comes to FPI. Here there is ownership of merely financial assets, and that is the reason in FPI there is no say when it comes to decision making of that particular company. FDI is usually for a longer period, FPI is for a shorter period, less than a year. But when it comes to FDI, it is for years or for decades also. When it comes to FDI, here the investor have a lot of risk, okay, because it is going to involve in the local economy, and if there would be any macroeconomic disturbances in that particular economy, FDI, the foreign direct investor, cannot pull out his money as quickly as the foreign portfolio investor can do. Okay, that is why the risk in terms of investor is quite high when it comes to FDI, but the risk is quite lower when it comes to FPI, because the moment there would be uncertainty, the FPIs would be leaving your country, and that is what is happening when it comes to India. And when it comes to impact on the host economy, it is larger in case of FDI, because they would be bringing advanced technology, they would this investment leads to creation of jobs also, infrastructure also, etc. But when it comes to FPI, the only benefit that we have is it enables the companies to get liquidity. Okay. Now, what all changes have been introduced by the RBI? So the RBI has changed the lending limit, okay, which the banks are allowed to give against the shares. Previously, an individual like me can get up to 20 lakh only in exchange of the shares. But now an individual can get 1 crore, okay, if he or she keeps shares as collateral with the bank. And the RBI has also proposed of raising the limits on the loan which can be secured against writs as well as InvITs. Okay, so hence the RBI is planning to expand the scope of the collateral which would be eligible for bank lending. Now, what is writs and InvITs? These are regulated by SEBI and it functions less like the mutual funds. Okay, in mutual funds, different retail investors, they would be giving some money to the the company, and ultimately the mutual fund manager would be investing. Now, when it comes to income generating real estate projects and the infrastructure projects, they need huge amount of capital which can't be provided by a retail investor like you and me. So these REITs and InvITs, they enable retail investor like you and me to earn from such income generating real estate projects as well as from the infrastructure sector. So it would function just like the mutual funds. You would be depositing whatever money you have, okay, in this particular thing, and then it would be pooling the capital of numerous investors, and ultimately it would be invested in the income generating real estate projects. And here in InvITs, it would be invested in infrastructure sector. That is the difference. Now, RBI has also proposed that it would be scrapping its previous framework which used to discourage the bank from lending to very large borrowers. What do I mean by very large borrowers? Which have an aggregate credit exposure of 10,000 crore or more from the banking system. And why this framework was there, which was put in place by the RBI in 2016, so that the companies do not rely merely on the banking sector and they should explore the capital markets, okay, to get the liquidity. But now, the RBI is planning to change this particular framework. Later on in 2020, the RBI came up with large exposure framework wherein the concentration risk has been addressed by capping that how much amount a single bank can give to a particular borrower. So in 2020, it was 30% of the tier 1 capital. Okay. And the RBI has pointed out that over a period of time, as this concentration risk is being addressed by this large exposure framework with respect to a single bank, we would focus more on the macro prudential tools, okay, instead of disincentivizing the bank from lending. These changes would enable the companies as well as retail investors like you and me to get adequate liquidity support, and this has given requisite flexibility to the banks so that they can support large projects, mergers and expansion without compromising the financial stability. Okay, in order to ensure financial stability and to avoid concentration risk, the RBI already have the large exposure framework in place. Okay, now this is a PYQ related to FDI that we have already discussed. Do let me know the answer to this particular question. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, recently, the National Investigation Agency has charge sheeted 2 people for illegal human trafficking through this Dunki route. This you can associate with the prelims topic, that is statutory bodies. Now, first of all, you need to understand that what is this Dunki route? It is also referred to be as donkey flight route, wherein what the people are doing, Indians are doing, they would be getting into a particular country wherein we have relaxed visa norms, and then they would be illegally entering into the bordering countries. Okay, this Dunki word is derived from Punjabi word meaning jump, because you would be going from one country to another illegally. Okay, now this route typically involves you would be obtaining the tourist visa for countries like previously we had this relaxed visa free regime with the Serbia. So Indians used to travel to Serbia and then they used to illegally enter into Austria, Hungary, and then ultimately to France and Italy. And when it comes to entering into US, what they are doing, they might be entering into Mexico or they might be entering into Brazil, and then later on they would be illegally entering into the parts of US. Mostly the migrants rely on human traffickers or the agents who arrange the travel documents, accommodation and transportation. So one thing that you need to understand is why the Indians are basically going through this tough Dunki route to enter into US. There could be probable reasons. getting visa is becoming difficult because of the change, rules with respect to H1B visa introduced by Trump administration. Then they are not able to get adequate, or better employment opportunities in India itself. Okay. So the government needs to address the situation by monitoring the migration thing effectively, and the government also need to create adequate employment opportunities for Indians. Now let's just note down certain impacts with regard to NIA also. So it was established after the 26/11 Mumbai terror attack. So it was put in place through the NIA Act of 2008. It is, supposed to carry out the investigation for scheduled offences. One case could be if the state government has given a report to the central government, and if the central government thinks that yes, this offence is fit to be investigated by this particular agency, so it would give the orders. In another scenario, the central government may, even without getting a report from the state, can give the orders to this agency to investigate certain offences. Section 8 of the NIA Act, lists down the scheduled offences, and it also states that the agency do have the power to investigate any other offence which the accused has committed if the offence is connected with the scheduled offence. And this was something which was upheld by the Supreme Court in the recent Ankush Vipin Kapoor versus NIA case of 2024. Okay. What does this mean? Let's suppose NIA was investigating a human trafficking case, and then it got to know that this person is also engaged in drug trafficking. So these scheduled offences, if it has been committed by accused, then this case could also be investigated by the NIA. Now, what all offences can be investigated by the agency? So the offences which are mentioned under these respective acts, you can look into. Okay, all these acts can be investigated by this particular agency. And in 2019, government amended this particular NIA Act, which included certain scheduled offences. Okay, so cases related to human trafficking, counterfeiting of currencies, manufacture or sale of prohibited arms, cyber terrorism, and offences under the Explosive Substance Act has also been mentioned under the NIA Act. So now the NIA would also be having the investigative power with respect to these offences. And it has also expanded the jurisdiction of this particular agency. So now this agency do have the power to investigate scheduled offences which are committed outside India also. And then it talked about creation of special courts. So the act empowered the central government to designate session courts as special courts for basically trial of the scheduled offences which are investigated by this particular agency. Okay. Further, now the state governments also can designate session courts as special courts. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently, the government has taken away its approval with respect to biostimulants. Okay. This particular topic you can associate with the environment section of a prelim syllabus. Now, previously, the government has given the approval for the biostimulants which were basically used for crops like paddy, tomato, potato, etc. But now the Union Agriculture Ministry has withdrawn its approval with respect to 11 biostimulants because the concerns were raised by the people belonging to Hindu as well as Jain community with respect to biostimulants being derived from animal sources like chicken feathers, pig tissue, etc. So because of religious and dietary restrictions, the Agriculture Ministry has withdrawn its approval which it has given previously. And this decision to withdraw the approval is basically related to one of the most common biostimulant, that is protein hydrolysate, okay, which can be derived from plants also, and it could also be derived from animal sources like feathers, hides, tissues, etc. Now let's just understand what are biostimulants. So these are basically the substances or organisms that are applied to plant, okay, they are sprayed to plants, they are sold in liquid form, which enhances the nutrient uptake by the plant, it promotes plant growth, enhances the stress resistance of the plant, okay. It is majorly sold in liquid form and it is sprayed on the crops. It is not like fertilizer because it does not supply nutrients directly to the crops. It basically enables the plant to, extract the nutrients on its own. And it is also not like pesticides, so it would not help in controlling the pest also. They simply stimulate the natural processes which are there in the plant, okay, hence enhancing the plant's own physiological abilities to deal with different kind of stress that is there. And the common types of biostimulants are humic and fulvic acid, seed, weed extract, beneficial fungi, etc. And in India, the biostimulants are basically regulated through Fertilizer Control Order 1985. So they were basically brought under this particular order in 2021. So this simply means that now whichever company is selling the biostimulants, they need to register their product and they need to prove the safety and effectiveness of the biostimulants. And now why are we focusing upon this particular sector? Because according to the Fortune Business Insights, Indian biostimulant market is currently valued at roughly $355 million, okay, and it is projected to grow many-fold. And currently, who are the major players in this particular market? So this is Coromandel International, Syngenta, Godrej, Agrovet. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently, the Defense Minister has pointed out that if we would be seeing aggression from the side of Pakistan, India would be giving a befitting reply to Pakistan. This particular topic you can associate with the places in news section of a prelim syllabus. So, recently the Defense Minister has warned that if we see any aggression from the Pakistan side near the Sir Creek area, then it would be getting a befitting reply from India. Okay, so when it comes to Sir Creek dispute, it is a long-standing, maritime and territorial dispute, boundary dispute between the two countries. And this is basically 96-kilometer tidal estuary, which is near the Run of Kutch. Let's just understand certain prelim pointers with regard to this particular place. So it is originally named as Ban Ganga and it opened up in Arabian Sea, as you can see here. This is Sir Creek. And it roughly divides the Kutch region of Gujarat, as you can see here. Okay, this is Kutch and the Sindh region in Pakistan. Now, what is the dispute all about? So, before independence, this region was a part of the Bombay Presidency. But after independence, Sindh became a part of Pakistan while Kutch remained a part of India. So, Pakistan claims the entire Sir Creek area as paragraph 9 and 10 of the Bombay Government Resolution of 1914, which was signed then between the government of Sindh and Rao Maharaj of Kutch, okay, which stated that this, basically fall in the Sindh province. So that is why Pakistan, stated that we have the entire control. Now, on the other hand, India claims that the boundary lies mid-channel as depicted in another map which was drawn in 1925 and implemented by the installation of mid-channel pillars way back in 1924. And another doctrine which India basically points out to is Thalweg doctrine in international maritime law. This is important. Okay, this is not that much important. This is important. According to this doctrine, if there is a water body or river, okay, between two countries, then the boundary line would not be decided anywhere in between. Okay, we have to look into that what is the deepest navigable line of that river. And the boundary line would be passing through this deepest navigable area, okay, so that both the countries have, navigation control over that particular water body. This is what the Thalweg doctrine in international maritime law says, and this is what is supported by India also. Now, why the two countries are fighting over this particular region, why we have a strong boundary dispute with respect to this particular region? Because despite having strategic location, this region is very important for fishing resources. It is one of the largest fishing grounds in Asia, and there is possibility that there might be presence of oil and gas reserves here. Okay, but these reserves are currently unexploited because of the boundary dispute which is there between India and Pakistan with respect to this particular region. That's all that we have to know in today's Analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice that quiz. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day, all of you.